to An Epic World, brought to you by Quadrian. I'm your host, Courtney Fingar, and as you know, this is our interview series that highlights innovators, thought leaders, and trailblazers driving transformational innovation in industries and economies worldwide. Quadrian is focused on inspiring epic growth by leveraging the combined forces of venture investment, foreign direct investment, and special economic zones. Today, I'm extremely excited to welcome a guest who is a big time expert in foreign direct investment and an old friend of mine from the industry, Charles Lartey, who has loads of experience involving the UK, but also with global markets and the intersection between the two. He's currently serving as head of markets for the Americas for the UK Department of Business and Trade. It's really great to have you here, Charles. Welcome.
Thank you, Courtney. It's absolutely fantastic to be here and to be a guest on your show.
Well, we're delighted to have you. I guess given your current role, I would love to know, how do you see the current linkages and environment for trade and investment between the UK and the Americas?
That's a really great question and a really good place to start. So thank you for that, Courtney. So I will talk about broader Latin America, but I'll zero in on Mexico to bring a bit of color to my responses. Our biggest trading partners by far within the Latin American region, Mexico and Brazil. Brazil sort of probably will almost double that we do with Mexico, something like 12 billion with Brazil, and it's around 6.6 billion with Mexico. And if you look at some of the things that have been happening more recently around the world, and particularly that are impacting the Latin American region, particularly large economies such as Mexico in terms of the relationship with the US and other such, but also picking on themes that are coming out from the PwC's CEO survey back earlier this year in January. There is actually a sea change and an opportunity that I see coming down the track. And I suppose probably it was even more prevalent. I spent 2 months in Mexico a couple of months back, and it was really, really evident. So I'll start talking about a little bit of specifics. So in all those economies, you have got uh, uh, you've had recent changes in governments, recent changes in regimes, which means that companies there are now beginning to operate under, I suppose, new legislative environments. They are getting to grips with ambitions that their markets or their governments are setting them. So, for instance, in Mexico, you've got Plan Mexico, which is all about internal growth and internal restructuring of the economy. In places like Brazil, then again, you are seeing sort of efforts being made to strengthen the economy. And actually, I was at an event last month, which was mainly about insurance and how climate is impacting the insurance world. So everyone is doing something different to boost their economies. And in all of that, they are beginning to look a little bit more outward. And again, as I said, I was zeroing on Mexico. Mexico, because they have been quite acutely impacted by some of the challenges that they've had with the US when the respective governments came in, and the introduction of tariffs, which has disrupted some of the trade flows between those two economies. And again, harking back to PwC's survey earlier this year, I think it was about, I need to find the number, but it's something like either sort of high 40s or low 50s% of CEOs who were interviewed were recognizing that actually they couldn't sustain growth in the single market, and they had in the next 10 years they wouldn't have businesses if they were stuck in the markets. So they need to begin to look at diversifying their market. So it is a really interesting time for economies such as Mexico. And again, you're seeing sort of similar trends in places a little bit further down. Argentina, I think some of the economic challenges there are well versed. So we're beginning to see more entrepreneurs who are thinking, okay, where if they can survive in those environments, and they are thinking globally, where can they realize the opportunities? An interesting place, Colombia. Again, a lot of tech entrepreneurs coming out of that part of the world, and it's a similar question. They are beginning to think, okay, how do we start thinking global right from the jump, not just a Latin picture or just an American picture? So it's a really interesting dynamic, which I suppose presents opportunity for UK, particularly where we are considering the launch of industrial strategy and the drive for growth that we have around some of these key themes. The sectors within the industrial strategy. So, advanced manufacturing, the creative, the tech and AI. Some of those spaces, business services, and finance and business services. Some of those spaces we're beginning to see those actors across Latin America beginning to think a little bit more globally about their ambitions.
I did want to ask you about the UK industrial strategy because you've worked also kind of on the front line of attracting investment in the UK at a local or regional level. Do you think the industrial strategy or any new regulatory moves have addressed any of the roadblocks that you used to face back in the day?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the one I point to more than anything else is the changes that have happened around planning, and particularly actually the creation of the expanded office for investment. I think those two particular elements are quite pivotal. I can remember some of the big projects that I've worked on in the not distant past being mired in planning and some of the challenges that we had around planning. And this was before the advent of things like Freeports, and even with the advent of Freeports, without the new legislation government has got within planning, actually those projects haven't come to fruition. Again, the industrial strategy looks to tackle things like energy cost and the high cost of energy for the industrial segment. That is really important because, again, I can think of projects from my portfolio where that has been a deal breaker between the UK and other markets. So really, really, really important. But also, I think the pivot that the following the Lord Harrington's review of the services that DBT offers to investors, and his proposal to for an enhanced office for investment, which was has taken root and launched sort of last month, or actually earlier this month, formally launched. Um, the fact that you now have a concierge service that is primarily focused on the most impactful and most transformational investment projects that potentially will look to serve either supply chain gaps or indeed other pinch points within the UK economy to drive our growth forward, aligned quite strongly to the asks that are coming out of the industrial strategy and the plans falling out of that, then I think that's a really positive move and a really strong move from the UK side.
Yeah, and it kind of fits with some movements you see in some of the UK regions to have capital investment teams rather than just your traditional FDI generators. Do you see more and more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's that two pronged place. Look at the sectors and what the sectors are needed, or what's needed to address sector and I suppose gaps within sectors, but also look at place and what are the things that are I suppose acting as blockers in place and putting resource into that. So yes, absolutely. I suppose well versed are the efforts being made to join up sort of Oxford and Cambridge, that corridor. You know, looking at places around the northwest and how those places join up, or how indeed spaces are available. Because if you're going to go out and you're actually going to look for these big transformational deals, where are they going to land? What needs to happen to unlock real estate? So I suppose a different caliber of person that's actually needed and a different mindset. And I suppose probably that's what you're reflecting. You're seeing some of that begin to come through in teams that are being formed regionally, or indeed conversations that are happening at regional level.
Absolutely. It's kind of a joining of a real asset community and FDI community. That's a space that's interesting me a lot at the moment. You did mention free ports, and I'd love to know, do you think they will be useful conduits for bringing investment into the UK, but especially into areas that may need it sorely? And are there any lessons that you can see that could be learned from successful zones in Latin America and elsewhere?
It's really interesting you asked that because so first of all, the quick answer is yes. I do see that as important because any space that you are creating that either de-risks the or de-risks investment for anyone. That's always a positive. Investors look at that positively. You look at since look at let's take Hull for example. You got the Freeport up in Hull, and you look at the amount of investment that has gone in there over the recent while, from the huge investments with people like uh, with Siemens and all the energy companies, the renewable energy companies that are beginning to base there. It's really transforming that landscape, creating employment, etc., etc. But actually, for the companies, it's also the talent and other such that they're having access to, and it's the draw that it brings in, the co-location of other of other entities that either feed their supply chain or indeed competitors who begin to see those advantages. But I think beyond that, when we look at the, I suppose, what Freeports are offering in terms of the incentives around sort of custom zones, the incentives around tax sides, and the incentives around um, sort of green buildings that you put up. Those are all really interesting opportunities that, or I suppose, vehicles that vehicles. I'm looking for a good word for that. I need to find a better word. They're all great incentives that companies will look for to de-risk their investments. And it's interesting because I just recently started doing some mapping to see actually what do investment zones across the Latin American region look like, and is there an interplay between um, I suppose, where they have got specialities and the incentives that they are offering to their residents, the companies that locate there. And indeed, one of the questions I have been asking is, what might an interplay between freeports in the UK, freeports and investment zones in the UK, look like if they teamed up with freeports and investment zones in other parts where we are looking to attract investment from? That's a very interesting thing that I've literally in the last sort of week started looking at, and it's taken me down a really interesting rabbit hole. Let's say the least.
I'm sure it is. I was going to ask, are there any spoilers or is it too soon?
It's a little bit too soon, but I'll need to look around and see where I've got copious notes around me. But what is becoming evident is, so if you take, and again I will point to Mexico. If you look at some of the free zones, and you look at, first of all, you look at the types of industries that are located around the northern part of Mexico. That's more or less the industrial heartland. And you think about the companies in those, or at least some of those that I've spoken to in the last couple of months while I've been out there. Yes, they are thinking about diversifying, and then you think that if there are special zones that are created that help de-risk some of their investments, and yes, you will have investors that will come from other places because they want to take advantage of the US market. But actually, some of those supply chains actually do supply into Europe and indeed further afield. And then you think, well, what do trade routes look like for some of those component parts? And you begin to look at some of the volumes, and you begin to make the case for, well, actually, you could have a plant somewhere. Then you begin to get an interesting link, trade zone to trade zone. So in a sense, you have free movement of goods, because of whatever incentives you're being offered. You're de-risking the movement of goods from one place to another. And there are some really interesting linkages that I can see when I look at the specialities of some of the free ports, or where some of the free ports are specializing in terms of what they want to attract, be it renewables or be it other such. There are interesting links that you can begin to make, and you can see where there could be areas for collaboration. Again, when I think about Mexico and its plans around renewable, or actually even when you think about the US and you think about the US's plans around offshore wind, and you think about, okay, well, where might the production capacity for that be based? Yes, you could. There's a lot of expertise when it comes to offshore wind over here in the UK. Wouldn't it be great if you have a collaboration between two free ports that have got sort of similar ambitions around attracting, and then you begin to get movement of supply chains and goods, and but that's my little quirky brain going off in off.
That, I'm very interested in that, and we'll have to have you come back to tell us some more of your findings when you get further into it. But it's clear that there are complementary strengths, from a sector perspective, but everything else between free zones and different parts of the world. And they need to be leveraged a bit more, and including between the UK and the Americas, but elsewhere. And I suppose it's why in the free zone world, it is very much a community, but I'm not sure we always capitalize on those direct complementary strengths as much as that we could be doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we probably just need to rethink and just have a whole brand new approach. Is my view.
We'll call it the Charles Lartey approach. So
Hey, I'll bottle that.
well, thank you. That we're out of time, sadly, but thank you so much, Charlotte. It's always great to catch up with you, and I'm definitely enjoying the rabbit hole that you took us down. And we'll definitely get you back to tell us a bit more as you delve a bit deeper into some of these, mapping out these linkages, because it's very much in the space in which we operate and where we're interested.
No, absolutely. I'll be delighted to come back and talk a little bit more when I've actually formed some more narrative around this. What I see is an exciting opportunity.
It's an exciting opportunity indeed. Thanks again, Charles, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. And we were really glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks, Whitney. Great speaking to you.
And thank you for tuning in. Join us for the next episode of An Epic World to see where we take you next on our global tour of innovation.